welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this second edition of GAP AI Talks 2025. On behalf of Growth Acceleration Partners, we are excited to host today's discussion on AI transformation for finance, banking, and capital markets. Our goal in the next 45 minutes is to explore how AI is delivering ROI in financial services while addressing key challenges such as compliance, governance, and scalability. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the question box and we'll address them during the discussion or at the end of the session. And with that, I will now hand it over to our moderator, Didi Walsh, who is GAP's VP of Developer Marketing. She will introduce our panelists and lead the discussion.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. As Loa said, I am Didi Walsh, and I do our developer marketing at Growth Acceleration Partners, which GAP for short. And GAP is a consulting and technology services company, and we provide custom software, data engineering, and modernization solutions. So as Loa introduced it, we're tackling a big challenge today. You hear over and over again, AI is no longer optional in financial services or anywhere. But the gap between promise and reality is definitely getting bigger. I'm sure all of us read the MIT report that found 95% of AI pilots fail. So we're here to give you practical, actionable insights on moving from pilot to production. And before we dive in, let's get a pulse on where all of you are. So let's launch a quick poll. Loa, if you want to launch the poll, which is, where is your organization in its AI journey? And the options are exploring, piloting, scaling, or mature. And take a minute to respond. And I am going to move it out of the way for me. If I move it, hopefully it doesn't get rid of it for everyone. All right. Hopefully everyone has responded. So Loa, can you show us the results?
50% answer piloting.
All right. Yeah, looks like most of you are in the piloting phase. That's perfect for today's discussion. So let me introduce our exceptional panel who has great expertise in this area. So first we have Vish Srivastava, Senior VP at JPMorgan Chase. He leads payment technology for one of the world's largest financial institutions, where AI generates $1.5 billion in annual business value. And next up, we have Sarah Lackey, VP of Strategic Projects at Open Lending. And Sarah brings a unique perspective. She's moved from CTO to overseeing AI governance during a business transformation. So she has lots of interesting stuff. And Guy Ellis, who's chairman at Trigger, and he's served in over 50 board and advisory roles and has actually written a book. It's called The Negotiation Code, and explores how AI and emotional intelligence shape high stakes decisions. So we've got an awesome panel for you today. All right, so let's start with the elephant in the room. Everyone keeps saying AI is no longer optional, and especially in finance. But a lot of organizations really are stuck in like a pilot purgatory. And so I want each of you to answer briefly, what's the real forcing function that's finally moving organizations from experimentation to enterprise deployment? And Vish, I feel like you have a lot of expertise here, so let's start with you.
Thank you, Didi. I feel it's a mindset shift. So AI is no longer experimental. We have seen the organizations are moving past the pilot or in the pilot phase and moving towards more maturity model. And now we are able to tie AI directly with the business outcomes. And I feel there are like a couple of reasons. Number one is the competitive pressure. So if peers are able to reduce cost, peers are able to improve customer experience using AI, and they're able to do a faster time to the market, Standing still means like you're falling behind. Number two is the governance maturity. The better frameworks are available, the frameworks are able to provide auditability and explainability, and the oversight have given the firms more confidence to scale up. And number three, what I think is the tooling improvements. There are cloud platforms and orchestration layers available, and which are like helping making the enterprise doing the deployments faster and safer. So I feel from my perspective, I feel we have only scratched the surface. And I feel like it's like a refrigeration has just been invented, and the Cokes and the Pepsi of the AI have yet to be built.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I love that analogy. Sarah, from your perspective in the lending space, what do you have to say?
Vish made some really great points that we're experiencing as well. And just for some context, Open Lending serves banks and credit unions. And so that's our customer. And of course, ultimately, consumers are everybody's ultimate customer. We've seen banks and credit unions be very conservative in the adoption of AI. It's really just been in the last 6 months or so that we're starting to get questions about our use of AI and hints of how they're putting policies in place. And so it has arrived, and we're really excited about that. I think one of the things that's driving them to start adopting AI is that consumers are really expecting that more Amazon type experience, as I like to call it. They're looking for an instant decision or an instant, outcome on whatever service that they're seeking. There are fintechs and companies that are emerging quickly in the space, thanks to AI, that are doing those things. And so our customers are realizing that in order to stay relevant and competitive and to serve their consumers, they have to start adopting those. And then just to kind of reinforce what Vish said, I think that on the technology side, things are better, but it's also been something that our customers needed just a better education on AI and the technologies. They really didn't have that. There maybe wasn't a lot of good transparency or data showing good results. And so I think we've arrived in that space as well. We're seeing these lender partners start to understand what AI can offer, and they know what to ask for to build the trust that they need to start adopting those tools. And so we're really excited. I think this is just the beginning of a big launch forward.
That's fantastic. It's interesting because I go to a lot of conferences and I talk with so many people, and everyone says the same thing, that they're behind. And so, talking about that, we still are in a very early stage is important. So, Guy, from the boardroom perspective, what do you think?
So I think Sarah and Vish made great points. Thank you, Didi. The common theme that came up, I think, was also competition, right? And how do you remain competitive in the market based on this kind of like, I feel like it's ironic that we're on a growth acceleration partners webinar, right? Because I think that's really it, right? It's growth acceleration that's happening in the market at like a rapid pace. And if I look at a lot of Trigger's clients, which are middle market, low middle market companies, often PE backed, everyone's looking for this immediate value creation, right? It's always been there. This is not a new thing, right? But in more recent, call it the last 2 or 3 years, the access to that value creation through the use of AI and automation has accelerated far beyond anyone's kind of wildest dreams. We've never really been in a position that you can increase your EBITDA by millions of dollars almost like within a few months by pulling certain levers through automation. But the one key theme that I think is still a bottleneck is data, actually having that clean data that you can actually use. So I think that's something that's slowing down the growth acceleration is almost getting that clean data. And I heard a really smart CEO at one of the most prominent AI startups, not really a startup, they're valued at over $1 billion now, but one of the most valuable companies in the space, said that in the battle of bad data versus great AI, bad data always wins. Right? So that's the one bottleneck that I think we're still facing.
Yeah, And it's interesting that everyone talked about value creation and kind of where we are. And Guy, you mentioned bad data and some of those issues. Do you feel like boards are asking the right questions about AI, or are they focused on the wrong metrics?
So Didi, it's a great question. I think we don't know what we don't know, right? And a lot of board members are trying to play catch up at the same time. And everyone's nervous about a few things, right? They're nervous about data, about cybersecurity, about what does this actually mean for an enterprise going forward from a safety and security perspective, right? That's like the one, call it anxiety, that I'm seeing kind of like across boards. The other big thing is, well, how can we use it to create value, right? And back to competition. How do we not fall behind versus our competitors? So those are the two main themes that I'm seeing is, well, number one, we're very nervous about this big thing called AI and like, how does it actually affect us and how do we stay accountable, right? And make sure that we're actually upholding our fiduciary duties as board members, right? But then also, how are we upholding our fiduciary duties as board members, ensuring that we actually have value creation through the use of AI?
Thank you. That's great. Did Vish disappear, or was that my imagination?
Looks like he's back.
Oh, good deal. Vish, are you there? All right. Well, I'll go to you, Sarah. So, to badly quote Jerry Maguire, let's talk about show me the money. So one of the I read a lot about open lending, which is pretty fascinating stuff. So Sarah, open lending makes decisions in under 5 seconds, but regulatory scrutiny is increasing. So how do you balance the business demand for speed with regulatory requirements for explainability?
Yes, and I just talked about how speed is becoming one of the important drivers for our industry. But at the end of the day, the answer is super easy. Regulators do not care about speed. They care about making sure that we secure the data and make the right decisions. And so we at Open Lending, we've just involved our compliance teams and our legal teams. We've sought outside counsel. We've just done that from day one. Every time we look at what's on the roadmap and we think about what we want to do, what we want to build for our customers, what does that look like from a regulatory perspective, and whose help do we need to make sure that we get that done? And we've done that since the inception of the company, and it really isn't that much different with AI. It's just now that we're kind of adding on an extra layer to the tools and the controls and the things that we already are doing and we're doing originally. There haven't been, but there are now a lot of fantastic tools that are emerging in this space that help with all of this. So for example, if you're in the Azure Stack, Defender and Purview, these tools have brought a lot of new features and capabilities that sort of put guardrails in place around your AI tools and the use of AI. So just a couple of simple examples. We're opening the doors to different tools across the organization for our business users. We don't want our business users to have to worry about what can or cannot go in those tools. We want to be able to control those things. And so there are now tools that can do that work. And so same for the models that we build and the decisioning that we do. Whether it's under 5 seconds or not, we have to make sure that it's traceable, that the data is good, and that we can see what's going in, we can see what's coming out, we can explain every detail of that. We're monitoring that. We've got controls on that, looking at any potential drift, bias, anything that gets introduced. And so AI or not AI, I think the same rules apply, and we continue to prioritize that.
That's great. That's really interesting. What's my question for you, because that's a lot. That's a lot to do. When speed and accuracy conflict, how do you make the trade-off?
Accuracy, no doubt. At the end of the day, our consumers, think about it, even, 5 seconds versus 10 seconds, they want to know you're making a fair, good, right decision. And I think anybody from the consumer all the way to the regulator would agree that that's the right answer.
Yeah.
And again, with the tools that are coming into play and the work streams and the things that you can put in place to trace things and maintain those logs, it is getting a lot faster. And I think most folks can achieve that quite successfully.
I agree. And it's a matter of really applying those resources. So Vish, now that you're back, thanks for coming back. So JPMorgan reports 1.5 billion in annual business from AI, which is super impressive. And so I think what everyone, in this webinar really wants to understand is how much did you have to invest to get there? And how long did it take to see returns? And what percent, and I'm asking you a lot of questions, but what percentage actually made it to production versus just dying in pilot? So those are the kinds of questions I think everybody wants to understand.
Absolutely. And I think we are talking money now. But before I answer that question, one thing for sure, AI can't fix the internet yet. We're still seeing outages. But yes, to give a perspective of the scale of investment, I feel like JP Morgan, if you look at the history of the investment in technology, JP Morgan in 2024 invested $17 billion. And that investment or expense in the technology grew up to $18 billion in 2025. And majority of that investment of the delta was on the AI. So not giving you a number, but you can get an idea of where that delta went in the AI, mostly in the AI. Now, when it comes to the value creation, we talk about this 1.5 billion to 2 billion in the yearly business value. That's incremental. And that investment isn't speculative. It's tied directly with measurable outcomes. And there are two examples I want to give. Like one is in the area of the fraud detection. We have seen year of year growth of 12% in rise in the number of the attacks. And after we were able to create these fraud models or fraud detection models, we are able to hold the fraud cost flat. And that's like a big win for us, where we are able to contain the cost, able to reduce the expenses or contain the expenses. Number two, we have seen in one of the in-house indigenous developed tool called Coin. It's called Contract Intelligence, and it automates the credit agreement or the review process. And overall, we have seen a saving of 360,000 legal hours annually. And that's like a huge win. So if you think about the payback period, of course, it's incremental. Some areas we have seen 2x ROI. Some areas we are still in the pilot or moving towards the more productionized state. But I feel like it's that full ROI is less than 5 years. Now you asked about pilot versus production. I feel not all pilot can scale, and but in terms of the numbers, we have seen more than 600 AI use cases have made it to production. So that shows the discipline, the governance, and making sure we have all the bells and whistles in place to make that scale possible. And the strategy we adapt on the JP Morgan side is fail fast. So we even try to do this hackathon and try to get the good innovative projects out. But if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. But making sure that you fail fast so that move to other important or critical projects.
Yeah, as a lifetime software person, fail fast is a good philosophy. What with you have a legit success rate. What distinguished the winners from the failures?
I feel number one is you measure your KPI. So first of all, look at the use cases which you are trying. Drilling down to the right use case is extremely important, and that does not come with making your production or piloting like any idea going to do start working on it. So what we have seen is, first of all, identify what business use case or business problem you are trying to solve. Number two is making sure you have enough data available in order to train your models. And number three is, are you putting the right KPIs in place to measure that business outcome or the success of the project. So all three have to like align together in order to make it a success project. Where we have seen the failure rates are, number one is, of course, if it's not a business use case, you can use some different solution. Not everything can be solved with the AI. And number two is like if you do not have enough data available, and Guy mentioned as well, like garbage in, garbage out. So that's another area where we've seen if you are too premature in identifying the business idea and taking it to start working on it or taking to production, that's where we have seen those projects have fall apart or fall on the floor.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. We have a lot of pilots going here at Gap, and the main issue that we have, or what distinguishes failure from success, is when we're trying to solve a real business problem. If we're just messing around, which of course, let's face it, messing around is fun. But if we're solving a real problem, especially if it's our problem internally, a lot of times that will get that done a lot faster. So let's move to our next topic, which is the big hot topic, AI agents. Everybody, I think, unless you're buried under a rock, you've heard about agentic AI. Vish, your JPMorgan research is focused on multi-step, multi-agent tasks. So can you walk us through a specific workflow that's already autonomous at JPMorgan and tell us about, what surprised you about where humans still need to stay in the loop?
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of multi-agents AI tools JPMorgan has developed. The top one which comes into my mind is Ask David. And when I asked my coworker about Ask David, he pointed me to David, and I thought, first of all, David is some back office guy sitting and said like, oh, he doesn't know anything about AI. And then he said, no, David is an actual tool, and I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but David stands for data analytics, visualization, insight, and decision making. So that's what David stands for. And the function of this David AI agent tool is it automates the investment research. So it parses your SEC filing, it summarizes your research, it generates the draft valuation with about like 90% accuracy. So if I give you a very high context about the architecture, it's like a 3-layered architecture. The layer one is more about think about it as a supervisor agent. It acts as an orchestrator where it accepts the inputs from the user. The user in this context is my advisor, your banker. So it accepts the user inputs, which could be any research about a company or an asset or whatever. And then it breaks down that user input into smaller tasks. And then once you have that context, it engages your sub agents. And that's where it hands over that command to the layer two. And layer two is all about the data AI agents. And it handles that AI agents at the data level. At the layer two, it handles your structured data and the unstructured data. Now, when we talk about the structured data, it's the AI agents going to some repository. It could be a database, SQL, NoSQL, and getting that information relevant to your query. And then when we talk about the unstructured data, which is another supervised, highly trained AI models or AI agents, it goes to unstructured data, which could be your web, it could be your Confluence and SharePoint pages, it could be your notes, and it translates all of that into like a SQL and GraphQL queries, and then it uses the large language model to summarize all these results together. And once this is done, when you have all the data gathered which are relevant to the user query, it pass on the control or the command to the layer 3. Now, layer 3 is all about modeling and quality checks, where it runs in the context of the David, it's a specialized tool for the research. So this layer 3 is running the financial models, it's checking the outputs, it's doing the the benchmark against the references, and making sure that you are consistently able to achieve that 90% accuracy. Now, once these three actions are done, then the loop back happens. The loop back happens back to the supervisor agent, which is your orchestrator. And then the final output is handed over to a banker, which is nothing but your results of what the output is from these all different layers. And that's where the human comes into the loop. So to summarize everything, these AI agents are able to handle the repetitive task. It's able to break it down, the complex problem, into smaller, simple units. And each units are calling specialized trained agents on the back end to be able to, get the information. Now, where humans are still matter is once the output is given back to the to the banker or the advisor, humans still are needed in the interpretation. So the human or the advisor in this case have to decide whether the assumptions are realistic in the market context. You have tariffs going on, you have geopolitical war. So that's where the human is still needed. The second is the judgment. So is the data all correct in the context of the market segment? Sometimes the market goes up, sometimes it goes down. Is that output in the context and making that right judgment? That's where the human is still required. And number three is what I feel in the context of this tool is the client communication. So once you have these outputs available in front of you with graphs, charts, and trends and all of that, still somebody have to translate these output to some trusted advice back to the client, and saying whether to invest or not to invest. That's where I feel like the humans is still needed. So to summarize the question on the autonomy is clearly achievable in terms of the repetitive task, but human is still needed when it comes to the trust, the strategy or the client relationship. I feel that still the human loop is needed in that territory.
Do you feel like it's overstated that, AI is going to take over, or have you been surprised at how much AI can do?
I feel it depends. It depends when you talk about the low stakes and the high stakes business use cases. In the low stake use cases, when things are reversible, you may give a little bit of leverage where things are running autonomous and able to do the task. And if a post goes on the Facebook and you are able to go and delete manually, still be able to achieve autonomy there. But in the high stakes job, when you talk about the investment, I feel still the human loop is needed. Still the assessment is needed. Still the interpretation, judgment, and the call is needed. So that's where on those high stake business use cases, you still want to have the human loop, or so that you are able to make decision in those contexts.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's great. Thanks. So let's talk about governance and actually boards, because Guy, you've been in, 50 plus boardrooms. So what's the question about AI that boards should be asking but aren't? And then what are they obsessing over that doesn't actually matter?
Thanks, Didi. So like I mentioned earlier, there's these two main themes that are kind of going on in boards, right? So the first is about security, and I know Sarah touched on it a bit. That security of the data is massive, right? Obviously, data breaches and all of that have been around for a long time, but now it's even more pronounced, and everyone's even more nervous about it. So understanding how to navigate that is massive. And if you followed cybersecurity has obviously always been really big and really important. But if you look at how AI has almost accelerated the need for it and the different use cases of cybersecurity in enterprises around data and the use of AI, it's massive. So I think boards are really focusing on how to actually make the environment secure, right? So I think that's like a really big thing. The other thing is what are the outcomes, right? So everyone's focusing on the what. Okay, there's AI. AI is the what, right? But what is the actual outcome? What is the ROI? How do you measure that ROI? How do you what is that definition of success? And Vish also mentioned that in the three-prong approach, right? Is that what are those KPIs that you're measuring, accurately, right? And I think that's it's massive, right? Trying to really just get to that, whether it's a big use case, a small use case, something that you're comfortable letting it just do autonomously or not, you still have to have an ROI, right? I mean, everything should have an ROI. And understanding that definition of success upfront is really important, and not just creating tools or using tools or implementing AI for the sake of AI or technology, right? It's actually saying, well, what is the business case? What is that use case? And what ROI are we going to actually achieve? So is it going to be a 15% savings in X, right? And that is exactly what we're, or minimum of 15% saving in X. That's what we're going to actually judge this against in time, right? But beyond that, I think what's really important, and we also touched on this earlier, a few of us, is what is that process, right? Like, do you go 2 weeks in and then realize, oh no, this is not going to work because of bad data or whatever the, security, whatever the case may be, and then you stop it, right? Instead of having sunk cost fallacy and saying, wow, we've actually already spent 6 weeks scoping this out, we've brought on the team, we know what to do, let's just carry on going and see if maybe we've missed something, and then spending more money, like spending good money after bad, so to speak. So I think those are some of the things that boards are really focused on in terms of the ROI and the outcomes of AI and automation just in general, in workflows. But on the other side of things, where I think boards are getting caught up, is there's so much noise.
Right.
I mean,
right.
AI has just become this term that's so loosely thrown around. Let's use, hey, surely AI can do that, like it's this total like loose term that now everyone's kind of like using just for the sake of using it, right?
Right.
But I think what's key is people are thinking about the almost public LLMs, right? Like the obvious ChatGPTs of the world, right? And thinking, oh, well, we need to train our entire workforce on how to use ChatGPT, and we need enterprise-grade LLMs and ChatGPT and all of that, which obviously has a use case. But how do you measure that ROI? When Vish spoke about, okay, well, JPMorgan saved 360,000, legal hours. Like that's an actual outcome, right? And what is that, right? Is that just using an LLM, a legal LLM? Like what is that outcome, right? So cutting through the noise, I think, is a huge issue, and trying to get through where people think, okay, well, there's these public tools, there's these LLMs like a ChatGPT, even enterprise that we can use, but how do you create that ROI, right? And if you look at that in depth, it's not just about the tool for the sake of the tool, right? It's again going back to that outcome. What is that business case? What are we actually trying to do here? And what is that measurable KPI that we can finish a project and say, oh, okay, we hit our definition of success because we agreed to that up front, while still kind of going through the milestones along the way, making sure that we're not just building something for the sake of building something.
Well, and with regard to outcome, I think so many people just see AI as the outcome. I don't know how many of you seen the meme. It's like shows CEOs screaming, "We want AI," and then some program I'm a nerd, so program manager asking, what do you want, and the CEO screams, "I don't know," and when do you want it? Now, so there's a lot of jokes about that. Sarah, you've been on a unique journey moving from CTO, I love our CTOs, to overseeing AI governance during a business turnaround. And that's a big pressure test. What are the governance practices that actually survive when the business is fighting for its future? And then what gets thrown out?
Thank you, Dee. And I love following Guy, and I just have to comment on his spiel there. There was this moment in time where I felt like everybody just wanted to slap AI on their product label, and it felt like, I imagine boards, I know leaders were like, oh my gosh, what do we need to do to just call ourselves an AI solution? I'm so glad to hear that boards are having the right conversations, talking about how do we use this new tool to our advantage to do more? What's our ROI? And that makes me very happy to hear. And so, yeah, we were, at Open Lending, we've just as all decisioning platforms and, have done for many years, there's some aspect of AI or machine learning that is used as a tool in some of those processes. I'm sure Vish can talk a lot about that as well, but we wanted to get a little ahead of what we knew was coming from an AI perspective. And so transitioning into the governance piece was important for us, even if we weren't using things like generative AI just yet. We knew that stuff was coming, and what controls can we put in place to make sure that we're aligning to the best practices we've always adhered to. And so step one, understanding, our customers, which in our case is credit unions and banks, what are their regulatory requirements, which I talked a little bit about before. And then of course, our customers, the borrowers or the end users, we're here to do the right thing by them. And so making sure we understand those things and have the processes in place for that. Simple example, any model that we build that impacts the decisioning process must meet fair lending practices. And so ECOA, FCRA, all of these different regulatory requirements that our lenders adhere to, we make sure that we have the transparency, the training, the testing, the monitoring in place for those things. And we bring in third-party audits to help us with that. And so keeping all of that going is the most important thing that stays. As an IT person, a lot of the frameworks that we use are also bringing in new standards, best practices, and playbooks to support AI. If you use things like NIST for your risk management, they have a new AI risk management framework. OWASP now has a top 10 for LLMs if you're concerned about vulnerability and security of your LLMs. Of course, ISO has new standards, and so on and so forth. So making sure that you continue to evaluate those tools that are at your fingertips and those best practices, and adopting those as you need them. And then data governance, which I think we've hit the nail on, many times already in this discussion. But as we went on our journey, all roads just kind of led back to our data. We had great data governance. We had clean data for our systems. Our applications were doing what they needed to. Our BI team was able to create reports. We had great controls on that. But with LLMs and this new AI technologies that are coming into play, suddenly things like lineage and metadata, cataloging everything, and making sure our sensitivity labels were in the right spot suddenly mattered more than it ever had before. And so we're backtracking on some of those things and getting those pieces in place, because at the end of the day, that is how you control your world, is making sure that the right data is going in and that you are controlling the data that's coming out of these models. And that's what we're here to do, to secure those things. And so, getting that in place is, which I feel like we've said probably 3 times now, is the most important. And then what goes, we were a small organization, so we didn't have a lot of red tape necessarily, but the layers that go with reviews and approvals of data in your standard governance framework, to the extent that you can automate some of those things, and AI can even help with documentation and things like that, so you can move the process faster, is critical. We also felt like we were boiling an ocean when we looked at everything. It's very overwhelming. And so again, just looking at what's on our roadmap, what do we want to do as an organization, and where do we think AI is, and what kind of AI do you think we're going to use to solve these problems? And then building a roadmap to just start knocking away at the things you have to do. So data governance enhancements was step 1. And then maybe getting some of the, other pieces in place that have nice reports around our governance. Maybe that comes a little bit later, as long as we know we're doing the right things and we address that first.
I love that. The data governance and then really being thoughtful plan are the critical things. So and thank you, Sarah. Let's talk for a minute, Guy, about the future. Your book, The Negotiation Code, explores how leaders make high stakes decisions using AI, and finance leaders, boy, that talk about high stakes decisions. the finance leaders face big choices of training staff on public tools, investing in proprietary tools, or automating workflows like what Vish talked about. Which do you think delivers the clearest and most measurable business value?
Thanks so much, Didi. So really in my book, just very quickly touching on that, and I appreciate you bringing it up, but how I view AI in negotiations, right, or in that kind of role is using it as a thought partner, right, using it as almost like your gym, right? So like just practicing and training your negotiations, training, asking it questions. How does this look? Am I missing anything? Is there anything obvious or not obvious that I should be spending some time on with regards to this financial model, or my budget or whatever, right? So using it as a thought partner, I think is super important. But back to your actual question, in terms of like training people and where you use it and finding that like lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, is I think every company is different, right? So it depends on the company, the industry, et cetera, but ultimately comes down to two things. It's pain points and it's opportunities, right? And really doing that in-depth discovery up front to say, well, what will drive the highest value creation in the shortest amount of time, right? And almost having like a laundry list of where you can use AI within the organization, and then saying, well, what's the cost benefit analysis of each one of these things in terms of cost, in terms of actual physical cost in terms of resources, cost in terms of time, et cetera, and then versus the actual benefit that we're going to get, right? And benefit going back to that actual measurable ROI, KPI definition of success, right? And ultimately, which one of these things will create or drive the most value, right? And value creation for the enterprise. So that's really, I think, the way that finance leaders should be thinking about it. And Trigger really focuses on the CFO or the CFO function as an entry to these businesses, to these PE-backed businesses and middle market companies. And the reason for that is because CFOs are looking at all the line items, right? They're seeing exactly, what's costing a lot of money, where the biggest capital intensive aspects are in the business. And for them, they can pull in the COO or anyone else if they need to understand, well, what workflows or processes or systems can be automated, or, how can we use AI or AI agents within those workflows. So ultimately, that's how I believe finance leaders, especially in that lower middle market and middle market company, should be looking at things is bringing on also like thought partners, right? Beyond just the AI, thought partners, but actual thought partners, consulting firms, people who understand this, and I like using the term live and breathe this, right? In terms of discovering what are those low-hanging fruits and bring them on board as partners. So you don't want to work with vendors or outsourced entities. You actually want to bring on either an in-house team if you can afford it, and if you can't, and the business can't support it, then an actual partner who's going to be there for the long term and go through or create that laundry list with you, help you decide what is that lowest hanging fruit, and then kind of like still be the partner down the road to run down that list of priorities with you and execute on all of that.
That's great. Thank you. So final question. Our audience includes CTOs and VPs who need to show progress fast. What's one thing they can do in the next 90 days that will actually move the needle? Can I start with you, Sarah?
Sure. It really depends on where you are in your journey. But if you do not have some sort of co-pilot solution for your developers, a cursor.ai, that is the biggest no-brainer to get something up for those guys. You can see measurable results very easily, and they have great reporting that helps you do that. And, maybe less measurable on the business side, but doing something similar to make sure your business folks have access to tools like ChatGPT or Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, something just to help them with content creation. That is the fastest way to get, folks, the quickest lift to get them moving. And I'll pause there and let others answer as well.
That's awesome. I agree. Those are amazing tools. Vish, do you wanna bring it in here?
Yeah, I want to just piggyback on Sarah's point. I feel like pick a business use case or a business pain point, run narrowly on the scoped pilot with measurable KPIs, show progress, and then you can prove yourself it's working or not working, and don't change the AI transformation. I think you all need to chase one win which you can prove in the 90 days. It could be anything. It could be your chat GPT or LLM suite, or it could be a chat bot which can write code for you, anything, but measurable business outcomes. Take one step at a time. Don't try to deep dive and try to do everything at once. That would be my idea.
Yeah, that's solid. And Guy, bring us home.
So while I absolutely agree with both Sarah and Vish, I'm going to try to take it from a different angle. And as a CFO, or having that financial hat on, you're always forecasting, and you're looking at your budgets, and you're looking in the future, in terms of where's this value creation going to come from? And so many times I've seen, live CFOs say we can actually, we can automate that. And what? We're going to say what? And it's oh my word, I need to find my CEO now. I'll see you guys later, that kind of excitement where you say, you can actually, maybe you're not going to actually achieve it in 90 days, but you can find that business case and that workflow to automate, as an example, within the 90 days. Find that low-hanging fruit. And when you see that low-hanging fruit, everyone gets very excited, and you're maybe not going to actually achieve the savings or the automation within the 90 days, but you're going to see the opportunity.
Awesome. Sarah, you had something to add there? Thank you, Guy.
What I said, and I wanted to share one thing that we did that I think could achieve both. We had a hackathon with the teams just to inspire them and get them digging in, because AI can be a little bit scary. And from that came a lot of great use cases and ideas, and actually some solutions, that were used. So I would encourage that if folks haven't tried that yet.
That's awesome. And that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our incredible panelists, Vish and Sarah and Guy, and thank you to our audience. And if you need help navigating AI transformation, GAP has resources and workshops available, and we'll be sending a follow-up email, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.